For more on the GOP's election strategy, I want to bring on Cassie Smedile, the RNC Deputy Communications Director. Cassie, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to start kind of very broadly with the Senate. I mean, that's something that Republicans have been very adamant about saying how important it is. We can go through the different accomplishments that they are, but I first want to let you speak to that. How important is it for Republicans to keep the upper chamber?
Yeah, it is the last standard bearer for keeping the Democrat socialist agenda away from the American people. If the House, if it was up to them, it would be socialism all day, every day, in addition to investigating the president. But what you have in the Senate is a body that has remained committed to upholding our Constitution, has remained committed to upholding the priorities of the American people. Just look, for example, of what they've been able to do with judges, making sure that we have good constitutional conservative judges. Those are lifetime appointments. It's unprecedented what the president and Mitch McConnell in the Senate has been able to do in that department. We know that that's a priority issue for Americans, and frankly, the #1 issue that drove many voters out to vote for President Trump in 2016. So that's important to make sure that that continues. But when you look also at all of the things that President Trump has tried to do, but has been unable to do because of the stopgap in the House, with the far left socialist squad running the show in the House, it has prevented a lot of priorities from being taken care of for the American people. So it's important to not only hold the Senate, but we've got to get the House back so that we can continue to not only keep this great American comeback going, but to just have structure and movement from our legislated officials again, instead of just incessant obstruction.
And, you know, to your point, Mitch McConnell even calls himself the Grim Reaper of those socialistic policies coming out of the House. He either won't take them up, or he'll say that they're not plausible to being passed in the Senate, so there's no point in wasting time on those efforts. But to your point, too, there was a point where Republicans did have control of the House and the Senate, and a lot of their critics would say that nothing got done on immigration, for example. So it does kind of stress the importance of having both chambers, and not only having both chambers, but kind of having an overwhelming majority in both of those chambers. So when it comes to immigration, as I said, nothing necessarily got done when they did have both houses. What are the type of issues that Republicans should be coming out to voters and kind of selling to them in order to reclaim the majority of the lower chamber?
Right. Well, I would take note that before President Trump, I don't think people, especially our elected officials, appreciated what happens when you listen to your constituents, when you listen to your voters. Not only do you get stuff done, but they come out and they reelect you, and they come out and they add to your movement, just like we're seeing with President Trump. So a lot of those people who maybe were, to pardon the phrase, but sticks in the mud and getting things done, even some Republicans, I think we've seen a way forward to actually get the priorities of the American people taken care of. And you've seen members of Congress either follow the president's lead, or we've seen new members of Congress come in who are willing to listen to their constituents. And so we need more of that. We need strong conservatives, but people who withhold or uphold the priorities of their constituents. We saw this whole swath of Democrats get elected last November who said, I'm going to be a pragmatist. I'm going to work with the president where appropriate. I'm going to be pretty moderate. And that didn't come to fruition. That was just all talk. The action was that they went right along with the squad and Nancy Pelosi, and they haven't worked with the president, and they've worked against the will of their constituents. So that's why it's so important to get more people elected. How are we going to do that? What are those issues? Well, of course, it's the kitchen table economy issues. It always is. What does it look like for you and your family, and yes, our country, and then looking out to the world? And what are the policies in place that are helping us to be as prosperous as possible? When you've got Democrats who are only offering proposals that would take more of your taxpayer dollars to create more government programs to have more control of your lives, versus the president and Republicans who are saying, let's cut regulations, let's cut taxes, let's figure out what we can do to give you more of your money, let you keep more of your money, and give you more control over your lives. That's the clear choice this election from President Trump on down the ballot. And we know that because the economy is perennially a top issue for voters, that this is going to be something that we think will be very successful for us, as things are going very well in our economy, but also going back to that initial point of who's listening to you, who's fighting for you, and who's just trying to have more control over your life.
No, I think you're right. And to your point, too, that time period that I was talking about when Republicans did have the control of the Senate and the House, a lot of the people who weren't necessarily in line with President Trump's agenda are no longer there. I mean, I think back to Jeff Flake, Bob Corker, those guys who were kind of resisting the Republican agenda, if you will. And it's kind of a testament to the idea that the Republican Party really has united around President Trump. We talk about his approval rating. We talk about how far his endorsements go, and that's really important since yesterday he kind of threw an endorsement against Jeff Sessions, which kind of surprised a lot of people, but it is a big step forward for Tuberville in that race as well. I mean, a Trump endorsement goes a long way. So really quickly, before I let you go too, what is the primary message that Republicans are making? Is it kind of comparing their agenda against the socialistic ones?
Absolutely. Who is fighting for more opportunity for you and your family versus who's just fighting President Trump and wants more control, government control over your lives? And I will just to one point that you were just making, yes, there's great support in our party and amongst voters generally for President Trump, but it's because he supports voters. Right. We're not coalescing around President Trump. He's coalescing around us. And so the way to be successful, the way to turn out not just our base, but a majority of voters is to be the one who shows up, fights for them, and fights for the priorities that we've said are important to us. President Trump does that better than anybody else. And certainly we've seen other Republicans who have been successful in their own re-elections have done the same.
No, I mean, you don't get a 90% approval rating within the Republican Party by going against the voter. I think that's very well said. Cassie Smedile, thank you very much for joining us tonight.